What happened to the counsel of God after its last mention in the Bible? And what are they up to today? Summary of Episode 1. There will be more Fringe Files episodes on this and on the implications thereof in the future, by the way. So make sure to stay tuned. Today's topic is God's Council of the Gods. God had a council of 70 angels in heaven. He doesn't need advice from any created being, but he sovereignly chose to have it this way, because he loves and values the opinions of his rational creatures. Now, in the case of them being good, he listens to them, and if they're evil, only as long as it ultimately leads to the fulfillment of his will. The only counsel the persons in the Godhead are bound to is the counsel of one another. When used to talk about the counsel of God, the Hebrew word for counsel has no connotation of function, unlike words such as advisory board or board of trustees, which do. It was called the council of the gods. The reason why is because the Hebrew word Elohim, besides referring to the Creator, also applies to angels and false gods, inanimate matter, and was translated to English as gods in the Old Testament. It is not a name or title of God, but simply a description of the kind of being that he is. The same applies to angels. The words El and Eloha, both which are also used to describe God in the Old Testament, are also there used to describe angels and false gods. In reference to inanimate matter that people ignorantly believe in and worship, we have to remember that the evil Elohim angels do attach themselves to them, and this affects people on a personal as well as a national level. Entire regions as well as individuals come under their control when the door is open to them through idolatry. Such is the case in places where the majority of the people there practice false religions and dedicate their nations to them. Even though it's not unbiblical to call false gods or angels gods with a small g, it is not wise for the sake of the consciences of the people who still believe in them, who we are supposed to win for Christ. The fact that angels were called Elohim in the Old Testament is affirmed in the New Testament in the book of Hebrews chapter 2, verse 7. Where Paul also calls the Elohim angels from Psalm 8:5, agalos, angels. In a similar way, he also uses the Greek word theos, which has the same property as Elohim, to describe God, angels, and false gods. In 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 5, he clearly states that angels in heaven are called theos, gods. God considered the 70 members of his council his children. Their function was to watch over the original nations of the world and teach them righteousness and lead them toward God and his law. But like Israel, over time they failed, became immoral like Satan, and chose his side. He became their new leader. The vision of the 70 shepherds in the book of Enoch talks about this. Sons of God are mentioned in Genesis 6, Job 1 and 2, along with Satan, and 38 verse 7. There they are connected to the morning star angels, and like in Psalm 82 verse 5, are also related to the foundations of the earth and the nations of the world. During the time of the Tower of Babel incident, God placed the original 70 nations that descended from Noah's 3 sons under their dominion as judgment, but kept Israel in the future to himself. And as a result, all nations are being deceived and controlled by them since then, mainly into viewing them as their gods and doing their evil will, except, of course, for those among the nations whom Jesus Christ saves. The council is related to the devil and his angels mentioned in Revelation 12, 7 and 9. The devil, according to Ezekiel 28, 14 to 18, and Isaiah 14, 12 to 14, always had the sinful ambition to be over the angelic council of God. This could also be why he appears alongside the sons of God in Job chapters 1 and 2, though not necessarily. Chapter 38 verse 7 of the book of Job lets us know that there is a connection between the kind of angelic being that he, Satan, is, a morning star, and the sons of God, from which we can infer based on this that he had a lot of influence on them due to that. Like other angels, they must have greatly admired him for his wisdom, light, and beauty, beside him possibly also being the chief of the morning stars and or them, and having on him all the amazing musical instruments and abilities which God gave him. As we all know, Music can have a hypnotic effect on people, which can be used to manipulate them, which I'm pretty sure over time he did. In both Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, we see that Satan, like them, is also connected to the nations of the world through the manner in which God in the future humiliates him before them and their kings and nobles. In affirmation of this, let us recall what Satan says to Jesus in Matthew 4:8 through 9. And all the other passages in the New Testament which show that he indeed is over all the nations of the world because of their sinfulness and rebellion against God. Angelic members of the council of God became immoral over time and chose Satan's side. As we learn from Psalm 82, the vision of the 70 shepherds in Enoch, and the rest of biblical and secular history, which show that the world which they were supposed to keep in order for God in general is deceived and under the influence of evil. They all failed at their job, beside possible other angels that Satan's managed to deceive and recruit. These 70 in turn have defected from God and have become the devil's angels, who follow him and do his will. I believe that this angelic defection from God is what's being portrayed in many pagan occult mythologies of the world, such as the Ugaritic one of El and his 70 sons who live on top of Mount Hermon, and wherever we see a pantheon of false gods headed by a leader. It is basically Gnosticism, redefining evil to make it look good. They try to make the devil seem like the good guy and God like the bad guy. But the truth is that they're the bad guys and they are all fallen. It is a perversion and mockery of the way God intended his divine counsel to be. And sadly, many people still fall for this lie. Other key places where this is what's actually being portrayed and praised in secret by the true founders and runners of these mystical strongholds, who are all really Gnostic occultists who worship Satan and fallen angels and demons, are the Vatican and Roman Catholicism, and in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. In the dark symbolism on the ceiling of it, George Washington, America's first president, who was also a high-ranking Freemason, represents none other than Osiris incarnate, who actually represents Satan or Azazel / Apollo, and he is there surrounded by a number of famous gods, fallen angels, forming his council. This is also seen in the Osiris myth itself, with the 72 beings who, together with Set, who is supposed to be either God, Christ, or the Archangel Michael, conspire against him. This country that people love so much is really just an occult experiment being conducted by secret societies. The people behind both of these institutions have dedicated themselves, their nations, and the world over which they, out of all people, have the most influence, to the devil, fallen angels, and demons. America for them is supposed to be a reversal of Israel and the counsel of God in their pure forms. As part of the operation, the devil has used Satanist Jewish families, Zionist occultists, who are part of the same occult strain from Babylon and other ancient pagan places, that also started and continue to secretly run the Vatican and Catholicism to bring this occultism to the United States. That's why in both places the same symbolism is used. Just look at, for example, the similarity between the number of first colonies in America and the tribes in Israel, along with the one which strayed from the path of the Creator, Dan. In the Egyptian mysticism of Osiris, there is a story about a missing part of his body, which is his penis, the phallus, that is later found and grafted back into it by his wife, the mistress. I wonder if this symbolically points to that tribe and the desire of these wizards behind the Vatican and Washington, D.C. to find it and recruit it because of its potential to channel as much satanic power as possible due to its great rebellion and sinfulness against God.